I remember the exact moment everything shifted, when my older sister, Celestine Ray, suddenly backtracked on her decision to marry Colonel Dorian Vale, the very man she'd once abandoned without a second glance. He was a war hero, paralyzed from the waist down after a bombing during a covert mission. Celestine had once looked at him like he was disposable. But when she claimed she wanted to marry him again, with a smug voice that demanded the miracle medicine only I possessed, I knew. Just like me, she had been reborn. You see, in a former life, everything crumbled because of her selfishness. Dorian's paralysis was the scandal of the year in our small military district. When he returned from the mission broken and barely breathing, Celestine refused to honor their engagement. My parents, well, they worshipped her and barely acknowledged I existed. Naturally, they forced me to step in as the bride instead. I was the disposable daughter, the one raised by my grandfather after they decided I didn't fit the family brand. I married a man who didn't even look at me when we signed the papers. Dorian, drowning in bitterness, had given up entirely. He'd rejected all treatments, convinced his life was over. But I wasn't some helpless substitute. My grandfather had been a legendary field physician, and he didn't just leave me his notebooks, he passed down every skill. Still, Dorian wouldn't let me touch him. So I told him a lie, a harmless white lie that gave us both a future. I said Grandpa left behind a box of miracle pills, 81 to be exact, that could cure anything, even paralysis. I promised him if he took one every day, he'd walk again. That lie became his lifeline. Dorian was skeptical at first. He had every right to be. But what choice did he have? A soldier who couldn't walk was just a memory with medals. And those pills? They were nothing more than honey-coated herbal sedatives. The real work happened while he slept. Every night, I would wait until he drifted off, then use the silver acupuncture needles my grandfather crafted himself. I would stimulate his deadened meridians, unblock nerves, and massage his pressure points until my fingers bled. It wasn't magic. It was science and pain and persistence. And it worked. On day 82, Dorian stood up. Staggered, but standing. From that moment, he saw me differently. The scorn faded, replaced by awe and something dangerously close to love. And as his legs strengthened, so did his ambition. Within months, he was reinstated. By the end of the year, he'd climbed 3 military ranks. They called him the Ghost General, back from the dead, unstoppable. That was when Celestine crawled back. She begged me to step aside, claimed she was the one meant for him. But I was already pregnant then, and I told her no. That's when things twisted into a nightmare. One rainy afternoon, she jumped into the river and died, leaving behind a suicide note smeared with accusations that I'd seduced Dorian, destroyed her relationship, and blackmailed her with the miracle pills. That letter changed everything. Dorian read it. His eyes grew distant. I noticed it too late. When I was 8 months pregnant, he led me to that same river, saying he wanted to walk by the water with me, just like old times. I didn't suspect a thing. Then he shoved me. As my body hit the freezing current, I saw his eyes, cold and flat. You stole her future, he said. This is justice. Neither I nor my child made it out alive. But fate, or something darker, wasn't done with me. The next time I opened my eyes, I was back in my childhood home. My parents were younger. Celestine was standing in front of me, alive. And Dorian? He was back in that wheelchair, the same blank stare on his face, like history had hit rewind. Only this time, I wasn't the naive girl with healing hands and a bleeding heart. This time, I had a ledger to settle. I didn't cry. Not when I saw Celestine grinning beside Dorian like a cat who knew where the fish was hidden. Not even when she dropped to her knees in front of me, theatrically begging for the miracle pills that, in truth, never existed. What I did feel, down to the marrow of my reborn bones, was confirmation. They remembered everything. They'd been reborn too. I could see it in their eyes. Dorian, trying to act like he didn't care, but his gaze never left my face. And Celestine? She had her claws in my wrist before I could even breathe, digging in like she could bleed the truth out of me. "Syra, please," she whined. "Help him walk again. I'll serve you forever if you just give us the pills. Grandpa's miracle pills can save him." I almost laughed. These so-called miracle pills? They were just herbal sedatives and crushed valerian, wrapped in beeswax and folklore. My real weapon had always been the needles. Acupuncture, guided by precise calculations of pressure, energy flow, and muscle response. It was my midnight war, fought while they slept. But they didn't know that, did they? Celestine thought she could kneel her way into salvation. Dorian believed a pill could rebuild his spine. My parents, oh, they were the worst, leapt to her defense without hesitation. "Syra," my mother barked. "Why are you being so selfish? Give your sister the medicine. Are you heartless?" My father, red-faced and trembling, jabbed a finger at me like he was driving a nail. "Do you want Dorian to remain crippled forever? Don't you have any shame?" Shame. These were the same people who beat me with broom handles when I refused to marry Dorian the first time. The same people who tried to marry me off to a 70-year-old widower when I turned 16 because he had land. I wasn't their daughter. I was a pawn, a placeholder, a backup bride for their precious Celestine. I stared at them coldly and said, "Do you honestly believe Grandpa left me any pills? He died in a car crash on his way to a patient. I didn't even get to say goodbye. And you vultures, ransacked his house afterward like magpies. You took everything worth a coin. All I left with was a cloth pouch and some notes. There were never any miracle pills." They blinked. Just for a second. And I saw the flicker of doubt, because they knew I was right. But Celestine wasn't about to let it go. "She's lying," she spat. "She's always been sneaky. Grandpa gave her something. She just doesn't want to share it." Dorian's voice joined hers, smooth like poison. "Syra, I know what I felt in the past. I could walk again. That wasn't a fluke. Whatever you gave me worked." And just like that, my parents turned on me again. "You're hoarding the pills," my father roared. "If you don't give them up," my mother hissed, "don't blame us for what happens next." I'd heard this tune before. Last time, they beat me until I bled from the mouth. This time, I met their threats with ice. "If you lay one hand on me," I said slowly, "the pills are gone forever. And Dorian will rot in that wheelchair until moss grows on his boots." Dorian flinched. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He also knew, deep down, that he was powerless without me. In our last life, I had been his secret miracle. Without me, he'd never rise again. Not in body. Not in rank. Not in glory. That night, after they stormed off, I sat in the ruins of my bedroom, my drawers overturned, my closet emptied, floorboards ripped up like I'd hidden treasure beneath them. They found nothing. Because there was nothing to find. But I was done playing nice. The next morning, I opened Grandpa's notebook and got to work on something new. Something dangerous. A special batch of pills, one that would ensure Dorian never stood again. Not even in dreams. He wanted a miracle. I'd give him damnation disguised as hope. By day, I played the obedient daughter. By night, I turned into something else entirely, a chemist, a healer, and this time, a quiet architect of justice. Every free moment I wasn't at the clinic assisting with stitches and herbal compresses, I spent buried in my grandfather's handwritten pages. His handwriting still smelled faintly of camphor oil and old medicine paper, and with every turn of the fragile sheets, I recalled the precise ways he taught me to break and rebuild a body. This time, I wasn't restoring anything. I was designing ruin. The pills I crafted weren't poison in the conventional sense. They were a biological bomb disguised as health. A slow-acting, nerve-frying mixture of processed belladonna, dampening agents, acetylcholine disruptors, and a trace amount of neurotoxic aconite, masked beneath licorice and ginseng. Harmless to the average consumer. But consumed over weeks, it would begin shutting down function, numbness, tremors, cognitive fog, sexual impotence, bladder collapse. By day 81, the user wouldn't just be unable to walk. He would be barely human. I prepared 2 boxes, one a harmless replica, the second, my vengeance. Each contained 81 identical-looking capsules. Only I knew which was which. Word got around that I was studying again, mixing powders, and, possibly preparing the miracle treatment. And like moths to a flame, they returned. One by one. Celestine came first, sobbing at my door with a performance worthy of an award. "Syra, you don't understand. I was just scared. Lucas, Dorian, he needed me back then. I ran away. I regret it." I said nothing. That's the thing about guilt, it always arrives dressed as repentance. The next day, Dorian showed up at the gate. He wore the same crisp uniform that used to hang loosely on his sunken body, but this time it was ironed to perfection. He pushed himself forward with every ounce of dignity he had left. "I'm here to talk," he said, voice clipped. "I didn't invite you," I replied, barely looking up from my bench. He tried again. "You still have feelings for me, don't you?" That actually made me laugh. "Dorian Vale," I said flatly, "I wouldn't touch you with tongs." He frowned. "You want revenge?" "No," I smiled. "I want you to recover. But I also want something in return." He leaned forward, suspicious. "Money?" "Yes." 10,000, I said, clear as crystal. His eyes widened. Back in our small city, that was 4 years' salary for most officers. "You're extorting me," he said under his breath. "No," I corrected him. "I'm charging for a service. That's what doctors do." 2 days later, Dorian returned with a suitcase, **8, for 60 in cash **, 4 government bonds, and a check for the rest. I counted it in front of him. Every note. "This buys you 1 box of miracle pills," I said. He snatched the wooden box like it was made of gold. "Don't think this means anything," he muttered. "I'm still marrying Celestine." I waved him off. "Then enjoy her company when you start soiling yourself." He froze. I left him like that. And of course, Celestine and my parents were enraged when they found out I'd charged him. "You vulture. That's your sister's fiancé," my mother screeched. "You should be giving those pills as a gift." Funny. When they married me off to him before, it was a duty. Now when I asked for money in return, I was a villain. No matter. The night after Dorian left, I stitched the cash into the linings of my coats. All of it. Like a second skin of power. Celestine knocked on my door again, pretending to be sweet. I ignored her. The next day, I packed the second box, the real box, filled with nothing but harmless powder, and tucked it inside my satchel along with my grandfather's original needles. I had someone else to see. Someone who might just matter. General Riven Kale. In my last life, he died too young, a car accident, slick roads, and a broken spine that never healed. He never got the treatment he deserved. Never saw how much of a savior he could have been. But in this life, I'd made sure he was saved that night. The night those thugs came after me. They were sent, of course. Dorian never had the guts to do it himself. But someone whispered in the ears of the alley rats and promised them payment if they could retrieve the miracle pills. What they didn't expect was a girl with a steel hairpin dipped in ground chili powder and laced with aconite. I took one of them down before I ran. The military jeep screeched to a halt at the intersection like fate herself had stepped in. And Riven Kale, legendary, stoic, wheelchair-bound, rolled out like a thunder god on borrowed time. He didn't speak much as they hauled the thugs into custody. Just watched me with those dark gray eyes and nodded once. A nod that said, I see you. That was the moment I knew, if I was going to pour my healing into anyone again, it wouldn't be for a coward like Dorian. It would be for a lion. When Riven asked about the pills, I told him the truth, or most of it. I don't have a miracle, I said. But I have skills. I can try. You're bold, he replied. Brave or foolish? Both, I answered. He smirked. Then show me. And so, 1 week from that day, I was scheduled to arrive at the Kale residence with my needles and whatever chance at destiny I still had left. But before that, before I could breathe in the promise of hope, I had to wade through the sewage of the past one last time. Because on the day I slung my satchel over my shoulder, Celestine and my parents stood outside the gate with smiles too wide, voices too sweet. We want to thank you, she said. Come with us. We have a little gift. And like a fool, no, not a fool. Like a tactician, I followed them. Right back to the river. It's strange how some things never change, even after death. The river still smelled the same. Cold, muddy, sharp with algae and forgotten secrets. The current whispered against the rocks like it knew my name. As I stood at its edge, watching the sun sink into the water's throat, I realized they had brought me here to bury me again. Not with a coffin. Not with prayers. But with the same contempt they'd wrapped around my throat in the last life. This isn't the road to the city, I said, turning to them. Where are we going? Celestine gave a tight smile. Shortcut. You'll love it. Behind her, my mother adjusted her scarf like she didn't hear me. My father wouldn't meet my eyes at all. And Dorian? He sat motionless in his wheelchair, hands folded like a king about to deliver a death sentence. I should have run. But I didn't. I needed to know how far they'd go. Whether they'd stop at the edge this time, or shove again. And they did. Lucas, no, Dorian, nodded once, a twitch of his jaw. The signal. My father surged forward and yanked the satchel from my shoulder so violently it nearly tore my collar. Celestine scrambled beside him, grabbing the box before I could react. My mother grabbed my arms and held me like she was hugging me, but her nails dug into my skin like claws. You thieves! I spat. Is this how you thank me? They didn't answer. Instead, Dorian opened the box with shaking hands. His eyes gleamed with obsession as he pulled out a pill and rolled it between his fingers like a relic. He sniffed it once, twice. Then his lips curled into a grin I'd seen before, in the last life, right before he watched me drown. You really thought you could trick me again, didn't you, Syra? He hissed. You switched the pills. You're trying to destroy me. Just like last time. You pushed me into a river 8 months pregnant. I shouted. What the hell did you think I'd do this time? Bake you a cake? He ignored me. I knew it. I knew you'd do something underhanded. Just like before. You scheming little, and then Celestine moved. She charged with no warning. Not a word. Not even a glare. 1 second she was beside me. The next, I was in the air, hurtling backwards as her shoulder smashed into my chest. I remember the sky spinning. The color of the clouds. The way my fingers tried to grab at something, anything. Then water. Freezing. Violent. Crushing. It wrapped around my body like a noose, yanked me under before I could scream. It punched into my chest. Into my ears. I kicked, clawed, but I wasn't near the surface anymore. The river remembered me. And it was angry. My lungs screamed. The water invaded my throat, filled every corner of me like a flood of old memories, memories of the last time I died here, of the child I never got to meet, of the betrayal carved into my spine like a brand. And then I heard them, muffled voices above, distorted through the surface like ghosts arguing in a dream. She's not coming up, Celestine's voice. Good, Dorian said. She couldn't swim last time. Why would this time be different? But what if someone finds her? My mother's voice trembled. We'll say she slipped, my father grunted. Who's going to question it? Another poor girl lost in the current. Happens every year. Exactly, Celestine said smoothly. They won't find her anyway. The current's strong today. She's probably halfway to the lake by now. And then, laughter. Real, honest-to-God laughter from all of them. The kind people make when a burden is lifted. When a problem solves itself. I stopped trying to swim. Instead, I remembered. What they didn't know was this: the second time around, after I woke up in this rewinded world, I made sure swimming was the first skill I learned. Not dancing. Not social grace. Not embroidery. Swimming. I trained myself every morning, plunging into cold ponds, rivers, canals, until my limbs moved like fish and my lungs knew how to stretch. So I stopped panicking. I adjusted my angle. Kicked downward, then launched toward the surface like a spring released. My head broke the water several yards downstream, hidden by the reeds. I gasped once, quietly, clung to a low branch, and watched them fade into the distance. They didn't look back. Not once. Like I was already a ghost. They wheeled Dorian back up the slope, the stolen box clutched in his lap like a holy artifact. Celestine tossed her hair and adjusted her dress, laughing. My parents linked arms like they'd just come from Sunday service. I watched it all. Soaking, silent, freezing, and alive. And I waited. For the moment when they'd finally, get what was coming. That night, they celebrated. They split up, Celestine and Dorian to the civil registry to get married, my parents to the police station to file a missing person report with tear-streaked cheeks and lying tongues. Dorian must have felt like he'd just bought himself another lifetime of glory with my pills. I imagined him swallowing that first one with a triumphant gulp. Then I imagined day 12, when the shaking would start. Day 22, when his bladder would leak. Day 42, when he'd cry alone at night, wondering why the miracle was failing. And day 81, when he'd take that last pill with shaking hands, only to realize the miracle was nothing but a myth. Meanwhile, I dried myself off in an abandoned forest hut, stitched my remaining cash deeper into my coats, and burned the decoy satchel for good measure. The next day, I traveled to the capital. And a week later, I arrived at General Rivencale's estate with a fresh case of acupuncture needles and a purpose that burned hotter than ever. The capital was a different world. Clean avenues, polished stone pavements, grand military compounds secured by gates that pulsed with prestige. And inside one of them, sat General Rivencale, the man fate had sent me to, this time not as a patient, but as a partner in defiance against the system that crippled people like us in silence. When I stepped through the doors of the Cale estate, I was no longer Syra, the disrespected daughter. I was Syra Dusk, healer, survivor, and architect of retribution. His study was enormous, trimmed with ironwood and dimly lit, the air carrying the faint scent of sandalwood and gun oil. Riven sat by the window in his wheelchair, back straight, uniform sharp, as though even his broken legs refused to make him small. "You're punctual," he said without turning. "I don't keep gods waiting," I replied. He let out a soft chuckle. "I'm not a god. Just a ghost with medals." "No," I said as I set my satchel down and took out the needles, laying them on a sterilized cloth. "You're a soldier who hasn't surrendered. That's rare." That was how it began. No miracles. No lies. Just hours of work each night. My fingers danced with precision, targeting his meridians, threading the needles gently into place, feeling the response like electricity beneath skin. Each treatment lasted over 2 hours: acupuncture, pressure point stimulation, soft tissue therapy. I didn't hide the process, didn't wrap it in superstition or legend. I showed him exactly what was happening, step by step. And he respected that. No whimpering. No groaning. No demands. Just endurance. I've had 5 different doctors tell me I'd never walk again, he told me on our 3rd night. One even suggested I'd just learn to enjoy chess. I smiled faintly. I'm not giving you a board game. I'm giving you a war. He looked at me for a long time after that. Then I suppose it's my honor to lose to you. Meanwhile, hundreds of kilometers away, Dorian Vale's decline had already begun. On day 17, the tremors started. His hands shook while lifting a glass of water. Celestine laughed it off. Must be nerves, darling. Or maybe you're just excited. He didn't laugh. By day 29, the nausea began. He vomited halfway through a ceremonial dinner at a family friend's estate. Celestine blamed it on nerves again, but this time, her eyes lingered a little longer on his face. She didn't say it out loud, but I could tell, she was remembering the timeline. Because in the last life, Dorian had already shown signs of strength and recovery by that point. He'd walked with a cane. Now, he couldn't even balance a teacup. The cracks were widening. Then came day 53, the night Dorian wet the bed. The first of many. No muscle control. No warning. Just shame and silence. Celestine screamed when she smelled it. Dorian cried. Not loudly. Just quietly, in the bathroom, as she replaced the sheets. He still believed the final pill would fix it. He clung to day 81 like a dying man clings to a rumor of light. But when that day came, he swallowed the last capsule with trembling fingers, then collapsed into a sleep he thought would bring him strength. He woke up with his face in his own filth. He tried to scream, but his throat locked. All that came out was a moan that sounded more animal than human. I heard about it 2 days later. General Kale had called me into the hospital for a checkup. He was now standing with assistants, gripping a cane like a king reclaiming his throne. His improvement was stunning. The doctors had no explanation. You've defied science, one of them whispered. No, I corrected him. I applied it correctly. We were walking through the corridor, Kale steady on his feet, when nurses began to whisper nearby. Is it true? One asked. They rushed in someone from the South District, former officer, apparently. Lost all control of his body. I heard he's completely incontinent, another murmured. Doctors say it's irreversible. Kale and I glanced at each other. He didn't ask who they were talking about. He already knew. The universe wasn't subtle. That same hour, I received a letter. No return address. No greeting. Just 5 words, scribbled in Dorian's distinct, jagged handwriting. You gave him my cure. I burned it without reading it again. Because it was never his. It had always been mine. Later that evening, Kale and I sat on his balcony. He'd walked 5 full steps that day. He was starting to regain sensation in his right foot, and his posture had improved dramatically. I've had many injuries, he said, sipping tea. But never felt more alive. Because now you're fighting with the right weapons, I said. You mean? I shrugged. I'm just the translator between the body and its silence. He looked at me for a long moment. No, Syra. You're the difference between fate and vengeance. I smiled at that. Because it was true. Back in the Southern District, Celestine was unraveling. She'd expected a husband who would rise in power, carry her into wealth. Instead, she got a man who couldn't walk, talk properly, or even hold his bladder. The last of the miracle pills were gone. She searched my old room. She tore apart the floorboards. She even bribed the apothecary who sold me herbs. She found nothing. And it began to dawn on her, maybe there had never been a cure. Maybe she had killed me, and gained nothing. Maybe I had beaten them all without lifting a single blade. Because sometimes revenge doesn't roar. Sometimes it drips. Quietly. 1 pill at a time. By the time day 90 arrived, Dorian Vale's name had been scrubbed off nearly every military ledger. His file, once marked with rapid promotions and commendations, now bore the black stamp of medical discharge. He hadn't walked. He hadn't recovered. And the whispers around the compound grew darker by the hour. They say he soiled himself at a meeting. His wife doesn't even change him anymore. Looks like the ghost general turned out to be nothing but a ghost. I didn't have to listen to the gossip. It reached me regardless, through clinic patients, fellow healers, even a nurse who giggled while stitching a soldier's arm. What once would have made me flinch now made me sip tea slower. Because revenge is sweetest not when you serve it, but when it serves itself. Celestine, on the other hand, wasn't collapsing. She was combusting. The lavish wedding she'd envisioned in her reborn life? Gone. Replaced with a cramped house on the outskirts of the city, one bathroom shared between a man who couldn't hold his bowels and a woman who couldn't hold her temper. Every day she returned from her part-time job at the sewing factory to the same unbearable stench, the smell of a future gone sour. Her dreams of being a general's wife faded under the weight of dirty laundry, soiled sheets, and debt collectors knocking on the door. One morning, after weeks of silence, she snapped. "I can't live like this," she screamed, slamming down a cup of watered-down coffee. "You ruined everything. You ruined both my lives, Dorian." "I tried," he muttered, his voice slack with weakness. "Oh, you tried," she spat. "You were supposed to recover. You were supposed to get promoted. You were supposed to take me out of this dump." He tried to sit up, failed, and slid back against the armrest like a discarded doll. "We can fix this. We can, maybe we try another hospital." "With what money?" she hissed. "I already spent everything on your useless medicine. I even pawned my wedding earrings." Silence. "You know," she said after a moment, voice low and bitter, "sometimes I wonder if Syra was the smart one all along." He turned his head sharply. "Don't say her name." "Why not?" she laughed, cruel and broken. "She's the only one winning." He stared at her like she was something monstrous. She was. But so was he. They tried one last thing. Dragging Dorian to the capital, filthy, starving, half-collapsed. A man with nothing left but a barely beating heart. They pushed his wheelchair into the elite military hospital, demanding a full evaluation. Celestine begged the doctors. My parents argued with the staff. Dorian sat, hands trembling, eyes vacant. And when the diagnosis came back, **** permanent neurological atrophy, full sexual dysfunction, organ degeneration, advanced bowel collapse ***, Celestine broke down in the hallway. "This can't be happening," she whispered over and over. "This isn't how it went before." That was when the nurses began to whisper. "Did you see General Kale? I heard he's walking now. Some young woman treated him. Miracle healer. They say her name's Syra Dusk." That name hit Celestine like a blow to the chest. Her knees buckled. "No," she gasped. "No. It can't be her." But then, I appeared. Not in a hospital gown. Not in chains. Not as the forgotten daughter or the obedient substitute. I walked in wearing a white coat, my hair braided down my back, and a clipboard in one hand. Beside me, Riven Kale walked upright, no cane, no chair. Just power in every step. Celestine's mouth opened in shock. My parents froze mid-argument. And Dorian, oh, he didn't blink. His eyes simply filled with the kind of hollow dread that only comes when your worst fear becomes flesh. "Hello," I said softly. "You all look unwell." My mother stammered. You're alive?" Surprised? I tilted my head. "Didn't expect the river to give me back, did you?" My father looked away. Celestine stood and pointed. You lied to us. You gave the wrong medicine. You tricked him." I stepped forward, slow and deliberate. "Did I?" Or did you assume you were entitled to something that was never yours? You switched the pills. She shouted. No, I said calmly. I never switched anything. The pills were fake. They always were. A pause. Then Riven added, I walked today not because of pills. But because she treated me. Every night. With precision and care. She didn't give me a cure, she became it. Dorian's breath hitched. Celestine's lip trembled. You planned this. Planned what? I asked, smiling thinly. To survive? To win? To rise from the river you drowned me in? And then, very quietly, I leaned in. Close enough that only Dorian could hear. You know what the difference was between you and Cale? I whispered. He never needed to be begged. He never needed to be tricked into hope. Then I stood tall and addressed them all. You thought this second life was a gift. It wasn't. It was a mirror. And now you're choking on your reflection. My mother collapsed into sobs. My father reached out to me with trembling hands. Celestine whispered curses beneath her breath. But Dorian? He began to cry. Not loud. Not begging. Just quietly. Like a man who finally understood his God had abandoned him. I turned away. Riven extended a hand to me, and we walked out, past the nurses, past the silence, past the pain. Into the sunlight. Into the new beginning. Behind us, I heard Celestine scream. And I didn't even flinch. It didn't take long after our hospital encounter for the rest of the world to catch up to the scandal. When a decorated officer like General Riven Cale defies medical odds and walks again, people talk. But when the healer behind it is the once-forgotten daughter of the infamous Vale family, who'd been declared missing, presumed dead, people scream. I became the miracle they couldn't disprove. Articles called me *, the river-born healer. Social circles that once turned their backs sent endless invites. The army offered me a private clinic. Medical associations scrambled to recognize my license. A university offered me a research fellowship I never applied for. And through it all, I smiled. Not because I wanted the attention, but because I earned every breath of it. Dorian never recovered. The army officially revoked his honors. He received a disability pension and was forced to move out of military housing. That left Celestine with one wheelchair-bound husband, a stack of unpaid loans, and no miracle on the horizon. Their house, once painted with dreams, rotted under the weight of mildew and silence. Celestine stopped pretending to love him after the 91st day. She started bringing men home. Boldly. Openly. Laughing from behind the walls while Dorian lay frozen in his chair, forced to listen. His mind hadn't dulled, only his dignity. She stopped feeding him regularly. Left food on a table he couldn't reach. Tossed water on the floor like she was feeding a dog. Some days, she forgot he existed. Others, she made sure he wished he didn't. My parents, bless their rotten hearts, couldn't care less. They moved out within the month, claiming they couldn't deal with the mess and that Celestine had made her bed. Funny. They never said that when they shoved me toward my own. But karma doesn't forget. And it certainly doesn't forgive. Months passed. Dorian tried to fight back once. He begged Celestine for a divorce. At first, she laughed in his face. You think anyone wants a half-dead man with a diaper and a debt record? But when she realized he was serious, she agreed, on one condition. I want your pension. All of it. He refused. She laughed again, not because she was joking, but because she knew he had no way to stop her. They screamed at each other that night. Neighbors reported shouts, glass shattering, and finally, silence. Dead silence. The next morning, news broke. The house was gone. Reduced to ash. 3 bodies were recovered, Celestine, and both my parents. Drugged. unconscious when the flames came. Dorian's body wasn't found whole, but parts of it surfaced by the river 2 weeks later: burnt flesh, rusted wheels, fragments of bone. The DNA confirmed it. They'd joined the same river they once tossed me into. I read the headlines in silence. Family perishes in fire. Tragic accident or revenge gone wrong? I didn't feel joy. Not even relief. Just stillness. And a long, slow exhale that tasted like the end of a storm. A month later, I married Riven Kale in a simple ceremony at dusk. No grand ballroom. No 1,000 guests. Just vows spoken in a garden with soft lights and warm wind. He wore his medals, but not for glory, for survival. I wore a crimson dress embroidered with vines, symbols from Grandpa's notebooks woven into the hem. A silent nod to the man who taught me how to heal, and when not to. Our rings were carved from black jade. Not gold. Because gold tarnishes. But stone endures. That night, after the last toast, Riven pulled me aside, held my hand, and asked the only question that mattered. "Do you feel free?" I looked up at the stars. At the sky that no longer hung heavy with revenge. And I whispered, yes. Because I did. Not just from them, but from the girl I used to be. The one who thought silence was survival. Who endured every bruise thinking she deserved it. Who mistook cruelty for destiny and loyalty for chains. I buried her the day I walked out of that river. And in her place, I chose myself. They say vengeance is poison. That it consumes the soul. But I disagree. The poison wasn't vengeance. It was betrayal, neglect, injustice. Vengeance? That was the antidote. It was the scalpel I used to carve myself free from every lie they wrapped me in. And when I held it steady, when I aimed it with precision, not rage, I didn't just destroy the people who broke me. I rebuilt myself. Now, when I walk, I don't carry shame. I carry legacy. My grandfather's techniques. My own survival. My future. And when the world hears my name, they don't remember a scandal. They remember a woman who walked out of the river, wet, furious, and reborn.